This is my update for Russian military operations in Ukraine for June 16th, 2022. I have been sick for the last week with the flu. I'm totally fine now. I'm back to business. I want to thank everyone for their concern and also for their patience and understanding. Now let's get right into it. Let's check out the map. This is liveuamap.com. It's very pro-Ukrainian. It is basically a visualization of Ukrainian government and general staff reports on a day-to-day basis. Everything in red is held by Russia. The main focus is in the Donbas region here to the east. Down in the south here, Kherson. This is a city that Russia has held since almost the beginning of this conflict, and they are consolidating political and economic control over it. They're also doing so around the surrounding areas and preparing the battlefield in the direction toward Nikolaev, because after Nikolaev is Odessa, and after Odessa, Ukraine is out of coast. They are out of coast. They will not have access to the sea, whatever is left of Ukraine. They're almost certainly thinking along those lines. But for the time being, the focus is on Donbas. So these troops are just holding. They're just holding this territory. Ukraine has launched on several occasions offensives in this area in recent weeks, but they have all failed to gain any momentum at all whatsoever. The same goes for outside Kharkov. Outside of Kharkov, we heard of this great offensive. It was a couple of weeks ago now. They even still refer to it as some great victory. But Russia has, I would say the last week or two, they have started gaining back territory outside of Kharkov, which is not good for Ukraine, because it would almost seem as if either locally their fighting capacity is collapsing, or they are sending troops to the Donbas region to fight, and therefore their fighting capacity is collapsing. Either way, it does not bode well for Kharkov, and it doesn't bode well for Ukraine's overall fighting capacity. Now, in the Donbas region, even this pro-Ukrainian map admits that all of Severodonetsk is taken except for this industrial area. Just like in Mariupol, Ukrainian forces are hiding in this industrial zone, the Azot plant, and they are there with civilians once again. So it's going to be another one of these drawn-out affairs where Russia attempts to get the civilians out and Ukraine refuses to let them out. And then after that, they have to cross the river to Lysychansk. But there's the prospect of Russia eventually closing this off. They are moving toward the north to cut this off completely, the lines of communication, and isolate all of these troops completely. Russian forces continue making their way towards Slavyansk, and beyond Slavyansk is Kramatorsk. These are also very important objectives for Russia at this moment. Everything else is secondary. Now I want to go down here to Donetsk. Looks pretty calm on this map, doesn't it? But in reality, it's being pounded by Ukrainian artillery every day. And we can take a look at this Reuters article, June 14th, 2022. 5 killed, 22 injured in Ukrainian artillery attacks in Donetsk. Russian-backed separatists say, like it didn't happen. And right here, they got pictures of it. There's literally pictures of it. And it says down here the photo is credited to Reuters/Stringer. So I don't know what they're talking about, but when you read the article, it's even worse. It says at least 5 people were killed on Monday in the Russian-backed separatist Ukrainian region of Donetsk in what separatist officials said has been an upsurge in Ukrainian shelling. Separatist officials and Russian news agencies reported several Ukrainian artillery strikes, including on a market. Russian news agencies later reported a shell had fallen on a maternity hospital in the city of Donetsk, triggering a fire and prompting staff to send patients into basements. And then listen to Reuters. There was no independent confirmation of any of the attacks, and Reuters could not ascertain whether they had taken place, despite taking pictures of them. There has been no immediate reaction from Kiev to the reports. Again, Reuters literally took pictures of this. So what is this? This is what the Western media always does. It's what they've done since this conflict began at the end of February this year, and it's actually what they've been doing since 2014. It's complicity. They're not just not reporting something. They know that if they were to report this, it would at least balance the narrative out to a certain degree. it might also create public pressure on Kiev to stop doing this. And by not reporting it at all, or reporting it but pretending like it couldn't possibly be verified even when they literally took pictures of it, this is allowing Kiev to continue doing it, isn't it? It is a demonstration of the level of war propaganda that we're witnessing from the West, and it's also an illustration of their complicity in these war crimes themselves. Now let's go to these Pentagon briefings. This first one, Secretary of Defense Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley hold a press briefing after the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting at NATO headquarters, Brussels, Belgium, June 15th, 2022. The links to all of this will be in the video description below. And this briefing, there's actually a video at the very end, at the bottom of the transcript. Now, this Ukraine Defense Contact Group, this is a lot like the Friends of Syria group the US led during that proxy war. So that was the US and its allies funneling weapons, equipment, money, all kinds of things into Syria to fuel that proxy war. Now they're doing the exact same thing in regards to Ukraine. It's another proxy war, and this is just another forum, copy and pasted over, but just in Ukraine now. They say 50 nations attended. They're talking about what the US is sending. So they're sending these HIMARS rocket systems with guided MLRS munitions, more javelins, helicopters, counter battery radars, and ammunition. And when they're listing it all off, they're trying to make it sound as impressive as possible. I have done videos about HIMARS and the M270s and how these multiple launch rocket systems, Ukraine had similar systems. They all got destroyed. These systems will also be found on the battlefield and destroyed. They're also extremely intensive in terms of logistics and maintenance. This is not going to be a sustainable solution for Ukraine on the battlefield. Not even close. They also talk about M777s. They talk about how they're sending 18 more in addition to the 108 or so the US has already sent. And now 18 more, I don't think is even going to cover the number of M777s that have already been destroyed on the battlefield. So this is the reality of what's going on in Ukraine. The US is not even sending enough to cover losses of other equipment they already sent. So that they can't even sustain a single level of these weapons on the battlefield. They also said they're sending 36,000 rounds of 155 millimeter artillery ammunition. You know, it sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's less than what Russia is using per day, according to Ukraine itself. So let's check out this AP article right here. US sending 1 billion more military aid to outgunned Ukraine. Listen to this quote from this article. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Malyar said Tuesday that without help from the West, we will not be able to win this war. She said Ukraine uses 5,000 to 6,000 artillery rounds a day, while Russia uses 10 times that many. So at Ukraine's firing rate, this 36,000 will last about 6 or 7 days. It's less than what Russia would be firing on any single day. The US also said that they're going to be sending these Harpoon missile defense systems. These are anti-ship missiles. They're usually fired from a ship. Since Ukraine doesn't have any ships, they need to put them on a truck. And since no one has something like this just sitting around, they have to build it, put it together. And that is going to take months and months. And there's another briefing that talks about that. I'll get into that in just a minute. Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin says, this is what he says, since the contact group first came together nearly 3 months ago, we've built tremendous momentum for donations and delivery of military assistance. And after this afternoon's discussions, we're not just going to maintain that momentum, we're going to move even faster and push even harder. Now, all of these donations, all of these deliveries, all of this assistance, and we look on the map, we see Ukraine getting pushed off the battlefield. They're losing. Ukraine itself is admitting that they're losing, that they need huge amounts of weapons, equipment, ammunition. They don't have it, and the West doesn't have it to give them. So if they just maintain their momentum, they'll continue losing at this pace. If they increase this momentum, maybe it'll be a stalemate. Maybe they think that. I don't think so. Now, General Mark Milley, he says, to date, we have trained 420 Ukrainians on M777 howitzers, 300 Ukrainians on self-propelled M109, 129 on the 113 armored personnel carrier, 100 on unmanned aerial systems, and 60 most recently graduating today on the HIMARS. Now, if they just trained 60 people on HIMARS, 60 Ukrainian troops on HIMARS, what use are they going to be on the battlefield? It takes 4 weeks for an entry-level operator, and as I've said, HIMARS battery is not made up of entry-level operators. They also have more specialized and experienced personnel involved in the whole process also. So how they could get all of this stood up in less time than it takes to train an average entry-level operator is beyond me. General Milley also said, additionally, the United States has provided over 6,500 javelins and 20,000 other anti-armored systems. Collectively, the international community has provided almost 97,000 anti-tank systems. More anti-tank systems than there are tanks in the world. And yet Ukraine is losing. He also says, we have also provided over 1,500 Stingers, more than 700 Switchblade tactical unmanned aerial systems, 20 Mi-17, and that's a helicopter model, and thousands of small arms and hundreds of thousands of small arms ammunition. And I guarantee you Russia is making and will be sending over 1 billion rounds to Ukraine a year. It does not seem like the US is able to match that on Ukraine's side. Now, these numbers are meant to impress you, but when you really look at the numbers, I mean, they're talking about amounts that don't even replace Ukraine's war losses up to this point. It doesn't even make up for their losses, let alone increase their fighting capacity to a point to even create a stalemate on the battlefield, because they're losing right now. Every day they're losing. Now, in this briefing, there's questions, and one of the questions was this. Ukraine has publicly asked for a long list of weapons, including 1,000 howitzers. Remember, the US is just sending 18 more, in addition to another 100 that they had sent before that. 500 tanks, 300 multiple launch rocket systems. You've repeatedly stressed the US assistance needs to be driven by Ukraine's needs. And with that in mind, do you think that this latest package risks providing Ukraine with too little, too late? And U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he basically says, well, we're just not able to supply everything that's wanted. There's no way for us to meet their demand. They always want more. This is what we can give them. But General Milley says, they asked for 10 battalions of artillery. 12 battalions of artillery were delivered and made no difference. Again, I've said 97,000 anti-tank systems. That's more anti-tank systems than tanks in the world, and it made no difference. They asked for 200 tanks. They got 237 tanks, and it made no difference. They asked for 100 infantry fighting vehicles. They got over 300, and they're all being destroyed by Russia right now. We've delivered, roughly speaking, 1,600 or so air defense systems and about 60,000 air defense rounds, and yet Russia continues to maintain air dominance, at least over the Donbas region. You're looking at 260 artillery tube systems. Either rocket or tube artillery have been already delivered. There's 383 committed, and like I said, almost 500,000 rounds of artillery. And again, that all sounds impressive until you realize that Russia has much more than that on the battlefield. And that's if they can deliver all of this, and if it could be used effectively by Ukraine, which I don't think that it can. For all of the reasons I've stated over and over again over all of these weeks. You're sending 155 millimeter artillery pieces to Ukraine, hundreds of them, but from all different countries. So they're all different models. They all require different training evolutions and maintenance and everything else. And then they require all different sets of spare parts. They're not interchangeable. And when you do this, you're actually creating a logistical nightmare for Ukraine. And when you're in the middle of a war, you need to simplify logistics as much as possible. And what the US and its allies are doing is the exact opposite. They're making it as complex as possible because they have no alternative. There's no alternative here. General Milley also says, there are no inevitabilities in war. War takes many, many turns. So I wouldn't say it's an inevitability. And he's talking about Russia taking the Donbas region. I think it is inevitable. But I would say that the numbers clearly favor the Russians, of course. In terms of artillery, they do outnumber, they outgun and outrange. You've heard that many, many times. And they do have enough forces. But the Russians have run into a lot of problems. They've got command and control issues, logistics issues, they've got morale issues, leadership issues, and a wide variety of other issues. So the Ukrainians are fighting a heroic fight. The fight down in the Donbas has been going on since 16 April, and the advances that the Russians have made have been very slow, a very tough slog, very severe battle of attrition, almost World War I-like. And the Russians have suffered a tremendous amount of casualties. Now, there's a few problems with this. Number one, a lot of Western analysts admit that these problems General Milley is citing, they're mostly worked out, or they didn't really exist in the first place. You know, when you're talking about logistics because of, you know, what Russian troops were doing outside of Kiev, as I've explained many times before, the opening phase of Russia's operations, they went in and tried to shock Ukraine into surrendering. It was a high risk, low probability of succeeding. They knew it would be a high cost in areas where this didn't work out. In places where it did work out, like Kherson, I mean, they took the city with almost no fighting at all, and they've held it ever since. And pretty much the entire south of Ukraine is under Russia's control because of this opening phase. Even though shocking Kiev and other cities in the north and northeast didn't work, what it did was hold a huge number of Ukrainian troops in place so that Russia could finish off consolidating control over southern Ukraine, including encircling and taking Mariupol and shaping the battlefield in the Donbas region. And as soon as that was all done, they withdrew their troops from the north and the northeast. And now they are focused on the Donbas region. So if you're going to say, well, that wasn't a success and their logistics were extended in that opening phase, I mean, of course, but that was the nature of what they were trying to do. What they're doing now is totally different. Number two, progress for Russia is slow. General Milley is saying that the progress is slow, but that's just the nature of the warfare Russia is fighting right now. They are trying to breach layered defenses that Ukraine built up over the course of 8 years. If you're following this conflict closely, say on Telegram, and looking at footage from the Russian side as they take over these positions, and you see how heavily fortified they are, you understand why it's taking a long time. It's not because Russia is incompetent or they don't have enough men or machines. It just takes that long to fire onto these positions, to weaken them, to degrade the military, the fighting capacity of the troops holding those positions so that you can move in and take them with minimized losses. That's what Russia's doing. They are trying to maximize Ukraine's losses while minimizing their own. That is why they're doing it slowly, methodically, systematically. And three, this constant claim that we hear from the West about Russia's tremendous casualties. I think they sustained most of their casualties in the opening phase. Again, the high risk, high reward, low probability, high cost strategy that they used in the beginning. But since then, that's not the case. They're losing far fewer troops now than they were in the beginning. And Ukraine is losing a tremendous amount of troops. They're admitting that they're losing huge numbers of troops. The West has never been able to actually substantiate this claim of these tremendous losses by Russia. I've heard all of these claims of these high casualty numbers, and I've heard people say, you know, if it continues like this for another week, Russia's fighting capacity will collapse. They'll have to start pulling out of, you know, here and there, and they won't be able to hold anything on the battlefield, let alone take anything, and yet they still constantly take territory. It's almost like these casualty numbers are being made up and are just a product of war propaganda. And the BBC asks a question. They say, do you really think that sending 4 HIMARS systems, the UK sending 3, Germany sending 3, do you really think that's going to tip the balance in the Donbas in Ukraine's favor? It doesn't seem that much when you look at the numbers. I know you've given me lots of other numbers, but do you think it's really going to tip the balance? And General Milley, he says no weapon is a silver bullet, but he claims that HIMARS and the M270s that the UK will be sending, they're very accurate. And he says this: the Ukrainians' artillery, their skills, the artillery skills of the Ukrainians are very, very good. They're top-notch gunners, and the effect that they're achieving on the battlefield right now with the M777s has been very, very good, very effective. And we expect the same out of the HIMARS. Well, they're on the battlefield. They've got their M777s, and they're getting pushed off the battlefield. They're losing cities. They're losing towns. They're constantly being pushed back. They're losing 100 or more men a day, dead, and then another couple of hundred injured. That's according to the US. That's also according to Ukraine themselves. They're admitting this. That's also according to Russia. They're admitting that this is the number of Ukrainians they're killing on the battlefield. Everyone seems to agree on that. So if that's what the Ukrainians are doing with their M777s, then I mean, if that's what they're going to do with the HIMARS, how do you figure that it's going to make any difference? Again, this is war propaganda. This is not battlefield analysis by these representatives of the Pentagon. General Milley also talks about the disparity between the number of artillery pieces Russia has and the number Ukraine has. He says the Russians do outnumber in terms of artillery. They outnumber the Ukrainians. The estimate varies. Some say 4, 5, 6 to 1. Others say 10, 15 to 1. Others say 20 to 1. What the true accurate number is, I'll keep our assessments in the classified realm, but they outnumber them, and that's important. Well, I mean, if it wasn't too bad, why would you classify it? They're obviously heavily outgunned, and nothing that the US is sending them now is going to make up for that. That is a fact. That's why he's not going to tell you how badly outgunned they are. Because if they were outgunned, and they could change that equation, they would put the numbers on the table and show you. But they can't, so they won't. But what he's saying is, okay, Russia has more guns, but Ukraine is using their guns smarter. But do you see any evidence of that on the battlefield? Again, when we look at even pro-Ukrainian live maps, and they show Ukraine losing territory every single day, how is that them using their guns smarter and somehow making up for the disparity in numbers? And that's if that's even true. You know, Russia's military is also well trained. They have plenty of experience, and they're obviously winning. So I don't know why we tried to pretend that Ukraine somehow is so much better at this. How could that possibly be versus the results we're seeing on the battlefield? It's not adding up. So this briefing was essentially the Western media understanding that Ukraine is losing the war, understanding that the West is not doing enough to change that fact, or maybe it's starting to set in that there is nothing that they can do. I don't know. We have to give that some time and see. Now, there was another briefing. This one, senior defense officials hold a background briefing. So we get some more details on the 2 Harpoon systems that they're going to send to Ukraine. Now, the media was asking questions about it. And what they're trying to do is create a truck-mounted system. And I said this weeks ago when they were talking about the Harpoon anti-ship missile system. I said that it's usually mounted on a ship. If they want to send it to Ukraine, it has to be mounted on a truck, and they haven't done that yet. It will take months to do that. And people said, it doesn't take that long to just, it's like an episode of the A-Team. Just do a music montage, do some welding, and it's done. It's not like that. It takes months to do this, if even. It might take longer than that even. And so one of the senior defense officials says, from execution of contract to building the systems to delivering the systems to including the training and all of the pieces that go along with operating a package that has kind of more technology in it than we've been providing and some of the capabilities to date. So that process takes a little bit of time to get there, to be on the battlefield and be operationally effective. That is the most important part. You can slap something together, throw it on the battlefield. You might even send a missile downrange, but will it be effective? No. To get it to actually be operationally effective, that will take months. That's reality. And there were people continuously coming back to this question. They were saying, why is it taking so long to just put these missiles on a truck? Why does that take so long? Because it's not a movie. Like I said, it's not a movie, it's not a TV show. This is real life. Even an existing weapon system can take years to be integrated into a military. So I like to use this example. Ukraine's use of the Turkish-built Bayraktar TB2 drone. They bought these, well, they began purchasing these in 2019, and from 2019 to the beginning of 2019 to the end of 2021, that was when the first Bayraktar TB2 drone was used by Ukraine in combat. That was years. It was a couple of years to do that, to buy it, set it up, train everyone, test them out, and then use them operationally, and then get enough experience to use them effectively. And now we're in 2022, and these Bayraktar TB2 drones are not even helping Ukraine at all in this current conflict. And that is going to be the process for all of these other advanced weapon systems. And if you try to accelerate that, there is a trade-off in how effective it'll be on the battlefield. And that will afford Russia many more opportunities to find these weapon systems and destroy them before they even do the damage that they would have done if they were employed effectively. So again, this is another briefing with the Western media complaining to the Pentagon about Ukraine losing, and the US government and its allies, their inability to change that fact. You cannot just pump weapons into a army that's being defeated on the battlefield, because even if you can get, say, these HIMARS units stood up, or these M270 units stood up, their crews are competent, they know what they're doing, they get out onto the battlefield, but if everyone else on the battlefield is being decimated, they're out of food, they're out of ammunition, they're not properly trained, you have your whole army in disarray, and you just have these rocket launcher systems on the battlefield, they're not going to be as effective as they would if they were part of a larger, coordinated, combined arms strategy. Ukraine is losing that capability, and no amount of weapons flooded into the country is going to change that. It's just going to be more targets on the battlefield for Russia. So let's keep an eye on all of this. For future reference, I usually do 2 or 3 videos a week. I've been doing a lot recently because a lot of things were popping up, but that's the normal number that I do. But I usually won't disappear for a week unless something is going on. So again, I want to thank everyone for their patience and their understanding my absence for the last week. If you like this video, please like and share. Think about subscribing. Check the video description below for other places you can find my work. I'm on Telegram. I'm going to start updating that again several times a day. I'm also on Rumble and Odyssey. All my videos are backed up there, just in case YouTube deletes my channel for some reason. Also in the video description below, you'll find all of the links to everything that I referenced in the video, as well as for ways you can help support my work. You can do that through Buy Me a Coffee, through Patreon, and also through PayPal. But use PayPal as a last resort, because they've been deplatforming people lately for their political views. So I could be next at any time. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's one-time donations or month-to-month, or even if you're just helping share my work with others, I greatly appreciate all of that. All of that helps. I couldn't do this without that support, so thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.